Okay, in this video, I'm going to be explaining the different stages of clay so that you understand the why behind all of the procedures that I teach you when we're making something out of clay. It's very important that you understand this so that when you make your project, it comes out of the kiln the way that you want it. If you don't understand this, it's going to be hard for you to make a successful project that doesn't fall apart. So the first thing we need to understand is slip. So slip is like the glue of clay. It's when you mix clay and water. So this would be like slip right here, where it's kind of like squishy. And you can use that as glue. So if you don't use slip between your pieces, if you attach two pieces of clay and you don't put slip, the slip holds it together when it's in the kiln, which is what we use to make your clay hard. So if you don't put the slip between pieces, after it goes in the oven kiln, it will just fall apart and break apart. And so that's why it's important to understand that you need to use slip when you're attaching something. Plastic clay is clay that is moldable and squishy that you can use to arrange your project. So this would be plastic clay like this, where you can kind of smush it and squish it and mold it together. So that is plastic clay. And that's what you'll be using to make your project. Leather hard clay is clay that is almost dry, but it's still cold when you touch it, and it's kind of stiffer. So as your project is drying, there might be a leather hard stage. In that stage, you could carve something into it with a pencil if you want like a design on the outside, or it's easy to carve your name into it. You also might want to use that if you're trying to make something that has edges that are straight, like maybe a box or something, because you wouldn't want to use plastic clay because it would just flop over. So the leather hard clay is a little easier to construct with. Now the next stage we need to understand is bone dry. So bone dry clay is after all of the moisture in the clay has dried out and before I put it in the kiln. I have to wait until it's bone dry before I can put it in the kiln, because if there's any water droplets in it, I'll show you what bone dry looks like. If there's any water droplets in it, it will explode or break apart in the kiln because the heat will expand the water droplets and then it will break. This is bone dry clay, so you can see it's like a different color than the plastic clay. It's a lot whiter and it's also fragile. So if you break, it's easy to pull apart. So it's important that we don't touch bone dry clay because it will easily be breaking. So it's fragile and dusty, and it's not cold anymore when you touch it, and it's dry. These are the things that I can put into the kiln. So when I put it in the kiln, I can close it and I turn it on, and the heat comes through all these coils and wraps around the clay and bakes it, and it gets almost like 2,000 degrees. So we don't want to come in here or touch it while the kiln is on, because we'll definitely burn ourselves or hurt our hands. After that, I take it out and you have bisque ware. So this is an example of bisque ware. These are all bisque ware. So bisque ware is hard. It's after you get it out of the kiln, and it's strong, like stone, and hard. You can hear. So it's nice and strong. So if I dropped it, it might not break. It still might, but it's much less likely to break than the bone dry clay. So that is something that is permanent, and you can take that home. If you choose to, you could then put glaze on it. Once you put glaze on it, I would need to fire it again, and then it is shiny like a coffee cup and might be food safe. I actually don't have any examples of that yet, but I will soon. Another option is to just paint the clay, and especially if you have a sculpture, that might be the fastest way to finish something. And then once it's painted, you can just take it home. You don't have to fire it again in the kiln. You can just take it home once the paint is dry. So that is all of the stages of clay. So we talked about attaching things with slip. We talked about moldable plastic clay, and then the hard leather hard clay that's still cold, and then bone dry, and then I've got to put it in the kiln and it becomes bisque ware. And then after that, you could choose to decorate it and make it glaze ware. So those are all the stages of clay. And when you understand this, it makes making your project successful easier because you understand what the clay is like at different stages and the different things that you can do to it during that process. So hopefully, since we've watched this video, we'll have more successful projects, and you'll need me a lot less in your process to help you understand what to do.